Sean Cole was just 26 when he made the fatal decision to take a swim that would cost him his life. A tech professional living in Darwin, Australia, Sean was invited to a friend's 30th birthday celebration being held at the Mary River Wilderness Retreat, an off-the-grid getaway nestled between Darwin and the edges of Caledonia National Park. With lush landscapes and a rugged charm, the retreat was popular with tourists and locals alike. But its beauty masked a deadly truth. The nearby Mary River is home to one of the densest populations of saltwater crocodiles in the world. Despite this danger, Sean and about 15 others were having a good time, unwinding and celebrating in the Australian outback. On Saturday afternoon, fueled by either adrenaline or alcohol, or maybe both, Sean and another friend decided they were going to swim across the river. Their plan proved they could do it. Signs warning about crocodiles were clearly posted along the riverbank, and staff at the retreat had even warned the group to stay out of the water, but those warnings went ignored. Sean wasn't the first to test the river, and others before had made it across unscathed. But what he didn't know was that just weeks earlier, researchers had conducted a survey at the exact same spot. It revealed 4 crocodiles over 13 feet in length, and a dozen more over 10 feet. In short, this was one of the most dangerous places in the world to swim. With their friends cheering them on from the bank and a nearby boat observing from upstream, Sean and his companion jumped in. The river stretched about 180 meters across, and as they kicked their way to the far bank, it looked like their luck might hold. Both men made it safely to the other side, grinning at each other with the thrill of the moment. But then they turned around and began swimming back, and that's when everything went wrong. As the 2 men began the return journey, the people in the boat noticed something, another shape trailing behind them in the water. At first, it looked like a third swimmer, but as the sun reflected off the river's surface, it became terrifyingly clear. This was no person. It was the massive, ridged head of a crocodile, bearing down on the swimmers fast. Sean and his friend had no idea the predator was behind them, until their friends began shouting from the riverbank. At first, Sean thought they were joking, but when he saw panic in their faces, he looked back and saw it. Just a few feet away, the enormous crocodile lunged. Before he could react, it struck, sinking its crushing jaws around his chest and dragging him beneath the surface in a brutal death roll. His friend could only watch in horror as the water exploded in thrashing limbs and foam, and then fell still. The river returned to silence. Sean was gone. Emergency services arrived and began a massive search effort. Days passed. Then, tragically, Sean's lifeless body surfaced about 200 meters from where the attack had happened. Nearby, a 15-foot crocodile was found lurking and was shot along with 3 others. Authorities couldn't confirm if it was the exact animal responsible, but it brought some sense of closure to Sean's devastated family. Sean was remembered as the careful one, the last person anyone expected to take such a risk. But in the wilds of Australia, even one mistake can turn fatal. And for Sean Cole, that single swim ended in his terrifying final affliction. In 2018, a 22-year-old woman stepped into the heart of the African wilderness, expecting wonder, never imagining it would end in horror. What began as an innocent visit to a game reserve near Pretoria, South Africa, slowly twisted into something else entirely. She hadn't even planned to be there. She was simply accompanying a friend on an informal visit to a lion sanctuary nestled inside the 200-acre Dinokeng Big 5 Game Reserve. Her friend had arranged to interview the camp's manager. For her, it was just a side trip, a chance to snap a few photos, breathe the wild air, and stand in awe of creatures most people only see on screens. The sanctuary was home to Kevin Richardson, the famed lion whisperer, whose near-mystical connection to his lions had captivated the world. She must have felt safe, even inspired. After all, these weren't just wild lions, they were his lions, trained, handled, adored. And on that day, as the sun filtered through the bush and the sky stretched wide and calm, 3 of them were out on a routine walk. Richardson, as always, walked nearby. Nothing seemed out of place, until it was. One of the lionesses spotted an impala, a blur of muscle and bone. The antelope bolted into the open. That single flicker of movement was enough to trigger everything. The lioness charged, ears flat, eyes locked, body alive with instinct. The chase was on. No one realized where she was headed. The impala darted, vanished into the bush. The lioness, completely engulfed in the hunt, gave chase, running full speed through the reserve. 2, maybe 2.5 kilometers, barely minutes for an animal like her. In the madness of pursuit, the boundaries between predator and everything else fell away. And then she saw something. The woman had wandered just outside the fenced area, maybe a few steps too far, maybe just close enough to get a better photo. She never saw the lioness, but the lioness saw her. There was no time to react, no time to shout or run or understand. The lioness lunged, and in an instant the scene transformed, tranquility to terror. The sound of paws on dirt, the weight of 300 pounds of muscle, the crunch of impact. She was knocked down, mauled with staggering force before anyone could blink. Her friend watched in frozen disbelief, unable to move, powerless as teeth met flesh, as claws tore through skin. The lioness wasn't enraged. She wasn't confused. She was still in hunt mode, operating on the oldest instinct written into the bones of predators. It ended quickly, brutally. Blood stained the dust. The woman's body lay twisted and motionless beneath the lioness's heaving chest. The breathless stillness of the African bush returned, but not the kind that brings peace. Paramedics rushed to the scene. Sirens pierced the silence, wheels kicking up red earth. But by the time they reached her, there was nothing left to save. Her injuries were beyond anything medicine could undo. Nick Dahlman, the paramedic spokesman, would later call the scene horrific. Kevin Richardson was shattered. He posted a message filled with grief. "I am devastated. My heart goes out to this young woman's family." He explained that alerts had been sent out. The team had followed protocol. This was never supposed to happen, but it had. Dino King's management clarified the facts, insisting the lioness wasn't one of the park's free-roaming wild lions. She was a sanctuary lion, monitored, familiar. Still, none of that mattered. A young woman was gone, her life taken in a matter of seconds by a creature she never even had a chance to fear. The tragedy sent ripples through Richardson's world. Not long before, supermodel Cara Delevingne had posed with one of his lions in a glossy photo shoot, calling it humbling, a beautiful, intimate experience. But the intimacy of wild things comes with a price, and sometimes that price is blood. Visitors still come. Volunteers still arrive to walk the reserve and learn from Kevin. The allure is powerful. The thrill of being close to lions, of brushing against danger while believing you're safe, still draws people in. But for anyone paying attention, that young woman's death is the reminder beneath it all. No matter how experienced the handler, how well trained the animal, how calm the moment may seem, lions do not hesitate. They don't pause. They don't forgive distractions. Out here, there are no guarantees. There is only instinct. And whether you're a photographer or a whisperer or an unsuspecting visitor, if you cross the line at the wrong time, you don't get to cross back. It was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime, a dream safari through the breathtaking wilderness of Zambia's Kafue National Park, where the air hums with bird calls and the landscape stretches wide under the African sun. Among the group of tourists was Gail Matson, a 79-year-old woman from Minnesota with a deep love for travel and wildlife. For her, this wasn't just another trip. It was a bucket list moment, a chance to experience elephants in their natural habitat, not behind glass or fences. But what was supposed to be awe-inspiring quickly turned tragic. During a game drive, the group encountered a large bull elephant, and while safari-goers are used to such close encounters, something about this one felt different. The elephant appeared agitated, its movements more deliberate, its posture more tense. Before the driver could reverse or navigate away, blocked by thick brush on both sides, the elephant suddenly charged. The massive animal stormed the vehicle, using its tusks and sheer strength to flip it over like a toy truck. In the chaos that followed, Gail was fatally injured, while 5 others sustained injuries. The footage captured moments before the impact, circulating widely on YouTube and news platforms, shows the elephant approaching steadily as a passenger nervously films the escalating situation. The guide, unable to escape due to terrain and vegetation, had no choice but to shout and brace. The video cuts out before the moment of impact, but the damage was all too real. Park authorities later confirmed the elephant had not shown prior aggressive behavior, calling the attack sudden and unpredictable. The incident ignited global debate about the balance between ecotourism and wildlife safety. While these safaris offer a profound connection to nature, they also carry risks that sometimes, tragically, cannot be controlled. Experts weighed in, noting that elephants, especially lone bulls, can be unpredictable, particularly during musth, a period of heightened testosterone that can fuel aggression. While it is not confirmed if this elephant was in musth, the behavior was erratic and forceful enough to cause alarm. The incident was not just a freak accident. It became a painful reminder that wildlife, no matter how majestic or calm they may seem, are still wild. Friends and family of Gail Matson described her as adventurous, compassionate, and endlessly curious about the world. Her death sparked mourning in her hometown, as well as reflections across the safari tourism industry. It also raised tough questions about whether the guides were properly trained, whether the vehicle was appropriately equipped, and whether park safety protocols were enough. In response, tour operators began reassessing driving routes, guide training, and emergency response tactics. Even veteran rangers acknowledged that nothing in years of experience could always prepare you for a bull elephant with a grudge and a clear path to charge. Yet, amid the sorrow and shock, some found inspiration in Gail's legacy. Her family shared that she would not want fear to stop others from experiencing the world's natural wonders, but she would want everyone to do it smartly, with caution and respect. It is a poignant reminder that the same force of nature we travel so far to admire deserves both our admiration and our understanding. Because when you are in the wild, you are not just a tourist with a camera, you are a guest in someone else's territory. And sometimes the host makes it very clear who is in charge. Just outside of Paris, there's a wildlife park called Thoiry, and it's not your typical European zoo. This place goes all out to recreate the full safari experience, offering guided tours in rugged jeeps, luxury chalets with panoramic windows, and even transparent tunnels that let you look predators like lions and leopards right in the eye. But while the park does a lot to keep guests and animals safe, that safety comes with one major condition. You have to follow the rules. Now, this terrifying story centers on a woman we'll call Marie, a 37-year-old who visited the park in late June 2024 with her toddler and her mother. They spent the day exploring the safe areas, sticking to the enclosed tunnels, and enjoying the sights. Marie's little boy loved the reptile house most of all. That night, the family stayed in one of the park's deluxe chalets, which happened to be located inside a zone called the American Exhibit, a massive open forest area modeled after North American wilderness, home to animals like wolves, bears, and lynxes. Here's the catch. That part of the park isn't open for walking. Visitors are supposed to travel only by armored jeeps with a guide, and even chalet guests have guards patrolling around them 24/7. But for reasons we may never fully understand, Marie made a fatal choice the next morning. After waking up and seeing wolves from the safety of her window, she decided to go for a jog. That's right, a jog, through an active predator zone. She left her son with her mother and set off down a path. The wide road eventually narrowed into a trail, clearly marked with multiple warning signs that only trained staff were allowed beyond that point. Whether she didn't see the signs or simply ignored them, Marie kept jogging, headphones in, totally unaware that danger was watching her from both sides. She was so focused that she nearly ran straight into a massive bear. Frozen in shock, she slowly began to back away, only to be ambushed from behind by something far worse. An Arctic wolf lunged at her ankle, trying to yank her down. She screamed and fought back, but seconds later, two more wolves, a male and a juvenile, leapt from the trees and joined in the attack. The male wolf lunged onto her back. The young one tore at her arm. The first attacker had dislocated her ankle and nearly ripped her foot clean off, but it was the male, clamping down on her throat, who would do the most damage. Luckily, two rangers nearby heard her screams and rushed in, scaring the wolves away just in time. Marie was alive, but barely. Covered in blood, unconscious, and barely breathing, she was rushed to emergency care. Doctors fought to save her, even managing to reattach her foot and stabilize her condition. But after several days in a coma, a severe infection in her leg led to her tragic death just a week later. Now here's where things get messy. Marie's family is suing the zoo, claiming there weren't enough warnings. The zoo insists there were at least 7 signs, but Marie's legal team argues that the signs were small, poorly placed, and lacked obvious danger symbols. The lion park near Johannesburg looked like paradise, wild, untouched, and teeming with life. For Catherine Chappell, a 29-year-old American with a fearless heart and a camera in her hand, it was exactly the kind of day she'd crossed oceans for. She wasn't just a tourist, she was a storyteller, a visual effects editor who had helped conjure dragons for Game of Thrones, chaos for Divergent, and battles for Captain America. But none of those digital illusions could prepare her for what waited just beyond the frame of her lens. She wasn't there just to see lions. lions, she was there to help save them. A passionate conservationist, Catherine had come to South Africa with a mission to document the fight against poaching and give a voice to the silent vanishing of the wild. She'd arrived early, eager to soak in the beauty of the land before her volunteer work began. This was supposed to be a prelude, a warm-up, a moment of awe before the real work began. Instead, it became her final chapter. The safari vehicle crawled along the dusty track, the air thick with the scent of sun-baked earth and the distant call of wildlife. Catherine leaned forward, camera poised, eyes searching the horizon. Then, movement. From the golden grass, a lioness stepped out, silent, powerful, perfect. Her muscles rippled with each graceful step, her amber eyes unblinking. The rule was simple, repeated at every park gate, printed on every pamphlet. Do not open your windows, but wonder can make you forget. The need to capture the moment can override the instinct to protect it. Catherine rolled hers down. The lioness moved closer, not charging, just watching, calculating. She was near enough now that Catherine could see the rise and fall of her breath. The lens lifted. A shot was framed. Then everything snapped. Without a sound, the lioness lunged. An explosion of motion and raw power. The camera dropped. The world blurred. Jaws clamped down in a flash of teeth and fury. There was no time to scream, no time to recoil, just blood and silence. In the front seat, guide Pierre Pochiter grabbed for the lion, for Catherine, for anything, his hands torn open in the struggle, his heart, already weak, seized under the pressure. He collapsed behind the wheel, pain blooming through his chest as the scene spiraled into chaos. The attack lasted mere seconds, but in those seconds everything changed. By the time help arrived, it was far too late. Catherine lay motionless, her body still, her eyes closed to a world she had once sought to understand so deeply. Paramedics did what they could, but the wild is merciless when the line is crossed. There were no second chances. The news swept across continents. Her family shattered. Friends wept. Colleagues in Hollywood mourned. Some asked how it could happen, why it happened. But the truth is stark and sobering. The lion didn't act out of rage or malice. It acted on instinct. Catherine Chappell came to Africa with a heart full of purpose, a desire to tell stories that could spark change, stories rooted in truth. And now, heartbreakingly, her story became one, a cautionary tale, a reminder that beauty and danger walk hand in hand in the wild. That one mistake, one moment, can turn wonder into horror. In the quiet midday heat of August 28, 2022, a tragic and baffling event unfolded at the Accra Zoo in Ghana. It wasn't a typical Sunday at the zoo with giggling children, wide-eyed visitors feeding goats, or tourists marveling at the rare white lion cubs. Instead, it became the scene of a fatal encounter between man and beast, one that left more questions than answers. A middle-aged man, whose identity was never officially released, somehow managed to breach not just one, but 2 levels of security, scaling a 10-foot outer fence and then a 20-foot inner wall to get inside the lion enclosure. Why he did it is still a matter of speculation. Some believe he intended to steal the prized white lion cubs, which are extremely rare and valuable on the black market. Others suggest it may have been a dare, a delusion, or even a misguided attempt at a spiritual ritual. Regardless of the motive, one thing is clear. Once he stepped into that enclosure, he stepped far outside the boundaries of safety, both physical and natural. Inside were not just any lions, but a protective lion family. And the male, Melvin, was not having any unexpected visitors that day. Lions are territorial by nature, and even more so when protecting their young. Within moments of the intrusion, the man was attacked. Witnesses reported hearing roaring and commotion before zoo staff rushed to the scene. The aftermath was gruesome, with officials later recovering the man's lifeless body from the enclosure and confirming he had died from severe injuries sustained during the mauling. What shocked many wasn't just the attack itself, but the sheer recklessness of the act. Zoos are designed with multiple layers of security, not just to protect animals from humans, but more importantly, humans from animals. Melvin and his pride didn't escape or break out of their space. They were in their home, doing exactly what nature wired them to do. The Ghana Forestry Commission acted quickly to close the zoo and launch a full investigation, confirming that all animals were secure and that no staff had been at fault. The statement they released also highlighted the need for the public to respect zoo boundaries, reminding people that enclosures are not just walls, but lifelines designed to preserve life on both sides. The tragic incident sparked international headlines and online debate, with many asking how such a security breach was even possible. and whether additional safeguards should be implemented. It also brought renewed attention to the risks faced by both humans and animals when curiosity or poor judgment crosses the line into danger. Melvin the lion didn't choose this. He wasn't a rogue animal or an aggressive beast on the loose. He was simply a protective father responding to a sudden and confusing threat in his space in front of his mate and cubs. Unfortunately, the consequences were fatal for the trespasser and deeply unsettling for the zookeepers and wildlife community who work daily to keep both animals and humans safe. In a way, this incident serves as a grim but important reminder that wild animals, no matter how used to captivity they may seem, still operate by the rules of the wild. There are boundaries for a reason, and when those boundaries are ignored, disrespected, or foolishly crossed, tragedy is often not far behind. The Accra Zoo has since reviewed its protocols, and while the animals remain unharmed, the emotional toll on staff and the public remains very real. Melvin, meanwhile, is still in his enclosure, still a lion, still a father, and still a creature of instinct. Unchanged by the headlines, but forever marked by the day a stranger dared to enter his world. David Jewell was a man of many talents, an entrepreneur, a community leader, and an adrenaline junkie with a deep love for kite surfing. Born in Australia, he later moved to Switzerland, where he spent over a decade building a successful life. He owned multiple eateries in the scenic ski town of Villars-Grillon, including a restaurant, gourmet burger bar, cafe, and deli. His mission was simple: bring the vibrant flavors of Australia to the snowy Swiss Alps. Over the years, David had built a reputation not just as a business owner, but as a trusted member of the local community. People described him as dependable, kind, and always willing to lend a helping hand. But in 2016, David took a well-earned break from his busy life and booked a holiday that promised sun, sea, and adventure. He joined a kite surfing expedition with Offshore Odyssey, a tour operator that specialized in reef-side adventures. The trip was set around New Caledonia, a tropical island territory east of Australia, famous for its rich marine life and secluded beauty. David was excited to spend several days kite surfing over crystal clear waters, surrounded by coral reefs and remote beaches. On one of the first days of the trip, the group anchored their catamaran near the reefs of the northern coast. The sun was shining, the winds were perfect, and the water was glassy. David strapped into his gear and set off across the ocean surface, wind pulling him into long, smooth glides. It was everything he had hoped for: pure freedom, pure joy. But below the serene surface, danger was lurking. A tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge, searching for prey. These apex predators are common in the region and can grow to over 11 feet in length. As David skimmed along the water, the shark sensed vibrations from his board. Driven by instinct, it moved in closer. When David launched into the air for another trick, he lost control during the landing and crashed into the sea. His kite lines went slack and the kite collapsed into the water. He was now floating, vulnerable. Moments later, the tiger shark struck. It surged upward and clamped its massive jaws around David's right thigh. Witnesses on the catamaran saw the telltale shape of the shark breaching the water, followed by a violent struggle and frothing waves. David screamed, blood pouring into the sea as the shark's serrated teeth tore through flesh and muscle. It released him seconds later and vanished back into the deep. The crew raced to his rescue, pulling David from the water and trying desperately to stop the bleeding. A distress call went out at 3:48 p.m. and help arrived quickly, but David was fading fast. He went into cardiac arrest en route to shore and was pronounced dead just after 5 p.m. He was only 50 years old. David's death was a devastating blow, not just to his family and friends, but to the tight-knit kiteboarding community. It also reignited debate over shark attacks in New Caledonia, which had seen multiple fatal incidents in recent years. Officials eventually closed some beaches and installed controversial underwater nets, measures that sparked backlash from marine biologists and indigenous Kanak leaders alike. For David, a man who embraced life to the fullest, the ocean was a playground. But in the end, it became the setting for a shocking and brutal encounter, his terrifying final affliction. The Namibian night was still, the kind of stillness that makes every sound feel louder, every shadow deeper. The stars hung low and bright above the desert, casting a soft light over the Hoheneb River Valley, where silence cloaks everything in illusion. It was the kind of night that seems timeless. Beautiful, yes, but never truly safe. Bernd Kebbel, a 59-year-old German businessman known for his success and generosity, stepped out of his luxury tent near the Skeleton Coast. It was just a brief moment. He was going to use the toilet. His wife and their friends remained inside, tucked beneath canvas and calm, unaware that just meters away, something had already begun to stir in the dark. The lioness was already there. Maybe she had been watching for hours, her golden coat blending into the rock and brush, her paws silent on the sand. She moved like a whisper across the earth, drawn in by instinct and opportunity. No roar, no sound, just movement, focused and final. The moment he stepped out, she pounced. There was no time for a scream, no chance to run. Her weight slammed into him, pinning him down. Her jaws, massive and unrelenting, closed fast. By the time the others heard the commotion and burst out of their tents, shouting, scrambling, throwing whatever they could to scare the animal away, it was already too late. Bernd Kebbel was dead. His body lay still beneath the stars as the lioness vanished back into the wild. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same. This time it carried with it a kind of horror that hangs in the air and won't let go. Officials arrived quickly. Police surveyed the site. The Ministry of Environment and Tourism launched an investigation. A report was promised, statements were taken, condolences offered, but none of it could rewrite what had just happened. None of it could give that moment back. Bernd wasn't just another tourist. He had once owned Namibia's off-road center, a supplier of expedition gear and safari accessories, and had spent years supporting conservation work. He understood the wild, respected it. He had given to the land that, in the end, took him. And then, just 2 days later, the lioness was found and euthanized. The decision was swift. Authorities deemed her a continuing threat, not just to tourists, but to the surrounding communities. She had crossed the line from wild to dangerous, they said. But had she? Or had she simply done what lions have always done, seized an opportunity in a land that gives them fewer and fewer? In this harsh corner of northwest Namibia, desert-adapted lions are ghosts on the sand. Only around 60 adults remained as of last year, their numbers dwindling with the prey they rely on and the human encroachment they can't avoid. Drought has stolen their food. Roads have carved through their silence. Fear has met them head-on. Bernd Kebbel was a man who believed in nature's raw beauty, who spent his life exploring it, equipping others to do the same. He knew the risks, but no one expects that moment. No one imagines that stepping out under the stars could be their last breath. This wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a collision between the human desire for connection with the wild and the wild's unforgiving reality. Because in places like Hoanib, the line between wonder and danger is invisible. And when it's crossed, there are no warnings, only silence, teeth, and what's left behind. At the Gondwana Game Reserve in South Africa, where luxury meets lion roars and elephant selfies are practically a rite of passage, tragedy and wild unpredictability collided in the most dramatic and heartbreakingly real way. FC Conradi, the 39-year-old co-owner, CEO, and unofficial elephant whisperer of the place, met his end not at the hands of poachers or corporate drama, but under the massive feet of one of the very animals he adored. You read that right? Trampled by an elephant. Not in some wild action movie chase scene, but during a seemingly routine morning stroll to gently nudge a herd of elephants away from the posh tourist lodges. You know, just another day at the safari office. Except this time it wasn't. Around 8 a.m. on July 22nd, 2025, as FC tried to move the herd, probably with his signature calm voice and I got this energy, one particularly moody 6-ton bull elephant decided it wasn't in the mood for polite direction. With no warning, it charged. We are talking tusks, feet, full elephant fury, and just like that, the reserve's beloved CEO, a man with degrees in zoology and business, was tragically gone before the morning coffee even kicked in. Rangers on site couldn't do a thing. By the time help arrived, FC had already suffered fatal injuries. It was a shocking blow, not just to the reserve, but to the world of wildlife conservation. This guy wasn't just some rich dude playing safari. He was genuinely passionate about wildlife, conservation, and running one of the swankiest game reserves in the country. The Gondwana team was shattered, releasing a tearjerker tribute that begged the public to let the man's legacy speak louder than the inevitable online rumors and wild theories. What makes this even more mind-boggling is that this wasn't even the first time the elephants at Gondwana had beef with the staff. In March 2024, David Candela, a 36-year-old field guide, was also killed by an elephant while leading a group near the reserve's eco-tent lodge. Same reserve, similar circumstances, eerily familiar outcome. Are the elephants organizing some kind of union or revenge arc? No one knows. But suddenly, those peaceful sunrise game drives feel a lot more like episodes of When Nature Attacks. Despite all this, the reserve's management is taking a chill approach. The elephant involved hasn't shown any unusual behavior, so they're keeping him in the reserve for now, monitoring his mood and maybe playing him some calming music or something equally soothing. But the decision not to remove the animal has sparked debates. Was this a freak accident or a predictable tragedy? Should wild animals in conservation parks be treated with kid gloves, or should there be consequences? Meanwhile, visitors are still rolling in, clutching their binoculars a little tighter and double-checking that no elephant is eyeballing them like they just stepped into a scene from Jurassic Park Savannah Edition. FC's story is a potent reminder of the wild and wildlife. These aren't oversized pets. They're 6-ton powerhouses with moods, instincts, and zero chill when provoked. Safaris and close encounters with nature's giants, the truth is that the wild doesn't read the script. One moment it's majestic, next moment it's deadly. So here's to FC Conradi, a man who lived and died by the wild. He wasn't just leading a game reserve, he was part of its rhythm, its danger, its beauty. His death is a sobering chapter in the safari tale book, a reminder that behind every magical elephant photo is a powerful creature that doesn't always play nice. Our next story is a chilling mystery that took place off the coast of Mexico in December 2023. 3 people were attacked in the span of just 2 weeks. But here's the twist. No one is 100% sure what creature was responsible. It started with 26-year-old Maria Jimenez. She was enjoying a swim with friends and family when she was suddenly attacked and killed in the water. Witnesses confirmed it was a shark, but the species couldn't be identified. Just a few days later, less than half a kilometer away, 2 more people were attacked near the resort town of Zihuatanejo. Naturally, most people assumed the same shark was behind all 3 incidents, but the truth might be far stranger than anyone expected. The first of those 2 new attacks happened when a young woman was wading in the shallows. One minute she was relaxing, then, in a flash, she was screaming in agony. Blood filled the water as fellow tourists rushed to pull her to safety. Her injuries were so brutal that doctors considered amputating her leg, though they managed to save it. Now here's where things get weird. When the woman regained consciousness, she insisted it wasn't a shark. She never saw the creature, but said it felt like being hit by jagged living rock. Not the rough, but rubbery skin of a shark. Her hands were covered in cuts from grabbing at something sharp and scaled, like the armored hide of a crocodile. The medical team treating her agreed. The bite pattern and the brutal tears in her flesh were more consistent with a crocodile attack than a shark's. And as rare as it is, crocodiles can end up in the ocean, especially during rainy seasons or after storms. There's even a species in that region called Morales crocodiles that have adapted to saltwater living. They're smaller than their freshwater cousins, but they're faster, stronger, and just as deadly. Now fast forward to December 14th. Despite the 2 earlier attacks, the beach wasn't closed. The latest victim was 75-year-old Belgian tourist Joseph Binance. It was late morning, and most beachgoers had already headed for shade, except for Joseph, who was enjoying a peaceful swim. Nearby on the shore, a family was filming their toddler playing at the water's edge. That's when Joseph suddenly cried out. He'd been bitten, hard, on the leg. The impact pulled him briefly underwater, but he managed to resurface, screaming for help. The moment was caught on camera. At first, people thought he was drowning, but as they ran toward the water, Joseph was yanked under again. This time, the ocean turned red. It was clear this wasn't just a swim gone wrong, it was a full-blown attack. As the rescuers approached, the creature let go and disappeared. Joseph was pulled to shore, but the damage was catastrophic. His right leg was nearly torn off, and tragically, it was too late. He'd lost so much blood that nothing could be done. The whole thing, from the first bite to the moment he was laid out on the sand, lasted under a minute. Joseph's death shook the community, especially since there's still no clear answer as to what killed him. The most likely culprit? A crocodile, over 3 meters long, lurking in salt water, something that doesn't usually happen but absolutely can. Sharks tend to return to hunting spots. Crocodiles? They move on. Whatever it was, it hasn't struck again, but it's still out there somewhere, silent, camouflaged, and waiting for its next victim. Quinn Swales, a 40-year-old British safari guide with a quiet strength and deep reverence for the wild, that moment came in the silent, sunlit stillness of Zimbabwe's Hwange National Park. Quinn had done this countless times, leading groups on foot, teaching them to read the signs written in the earth and leaves, tracking lions not with fear, but with understanding. He knew these lands like the lines on his palms. He trusted them, and that morning, his tourists followed him through the hush of the savannah, not realizing they were steps away from the edge of something unforgiving. Then it happened. From the tall grass, a blur, a sudden unstoppable force. A massive male lion exploded into view. He stepped forward. In that breathless moment, Quinn Swales made a choice only the brave can make. He placed his body between the charging lion and the people he had vowed to protect. With only his voice, his presence, and every ounce of his knowledge, he tried to stop the inevitable. He did everything he could to draw the lion's wrath to himself and away from them, and it worked. The lion veered toward him, away from the group, but the cost was unimaginable. It happened so fast. Claws tore flesh, jaws clamped down, blood splashed across the grass. The tourists, too stunned to scream, could only watch as the man who had just moments ago led them calmly through the wilderness was now locked in a fatal struggle against nature's rawest violence. He never stood a chance. By the time help arrived, it was already too late. Quinn lay crumpled in the dirt, his body broken but his mission fulfilled. Not a single tourist had been harmed. He had bought their lives with his own. News of his death hit hard, and it hit globally. Not just because a man had died, but because this man had lived so intentionally. He had once been a pilot, soaring above the world, but gave it up to be on the ground among the wild things he loved. He didn't just guide people. He taught them to feel the wild, to understand its rhythm, its wonder, its danger. Friends, family, and strangers alike mourned him. His fellow rangers were gutted. Tourists who had once walked behind him through the bush couldn't believe it. Social media flooded with memories of his calm voice, his infectious passion, his quiet bravery. And then came the cruel twist. Only weeks before Quinn's death, Hwanghae National Park had already been in the global spotlight because of another lion, one whose name had become legend, Cecil, the black-maned king who roamed the park as if it were his personal throne. He had been part of an Oxford research study, tracked, beloved, protected, until he wasn't. Cecil had been lured out of the safe zone by an American dentist named Walter Palmer, lured, wounded with a bow, then stalked for 40 long hours before the final shot ended him. The outcry was massive, international, but it didn't bring Cecil back. What few knew was that Quinn Swales had admired that lion. He had taken pictures of him, even used one as his Facebook cover photo. And now, fate had dealt its cruelest hand. Quinn, a defender of lions, had died at the claws of one, but not out of irony, out of instinct. That's the part people always forget. Lions don't know legacies. They don't know heroes. They know hunger, territory, survival. The lion that killed Quinn wasn't evil. It was wild. In January 2017, a tragic and widely publicized incident unfolded at the Yungar Wildlife Park, more commonly known as Ningbo Zoo, in China's Zhejiang province. A middle-aged man, later identified as Mr. Zhang, attempted to bypass the zoo's entrance fee by scaling a 3-meter wall with the intention of sneaking into the park. What began as a misguided effort to save money quickly turned into a horrifying and fatal mistake. After climbing over the first wall and slipping past further barriers, Zhang ended up inside the tiger enclosure, home to several adult Bengal tigers. Within moments of entering, he was spotted by the animals who, confused and curious, approached him. At first, onlookers and his own family, who had entered the park legally and were completely unaware of his plan, watched in shock as the tigers surrounded him. The situation escalated rapidly as one tiger lunged, clamping down on Zhang's neck and dragging him across the enclosure. Zoo staff responded with urgency, attempting to scare the animals away using firecrackers and water hoses, but the tiger refused to release its grip. In front of stunned visitors, including Zhang's wife and children, the attack continued until police were called in, and one of the tigers was shot and killed in an effort to rescue him. Zhang was eventually retrieved and rushed to a nearby hospital, but the injuries were far too severe and he was pronounced dead shortly after. The story made headlines across China and beyond, prompting an outpouring of public reaction that ranged from sorrow to outrage. Many criticized the zoo for what they saw as inadequate security, claiming the outer wall was too easy to scale. Others condemned Zhang's recklessness, pointing out that signs had been clearly posted warning of the dangers and marking the area as a restricted zone. Online discussions reflected a broader debate, with some mourning the loss of human life, while others were deeply saddened by the death of the tiger, which had only acted on instinct within its territory. The incident also revived memories of similar attacks. including the notorious Battling Wildlife World incident just a year prior, where a woman was mauled after stepping out of her vehicle inside a tiger safari zone. In both cases, a combination of human error and underestimation of animal behavior had led to devastating consequences. Zhang's story stands as a somber reminder that wild animals, even those kept in enclosures, are not and will never be tame. A tiger's instinct is to investigate, stalk, and if provoked or simply confused, strike. These animals are not villains. They are apex predators responding to unfamiliar stimuli in their domain. While zoos can and should uphold the highest safety standards, the responsibility also lies with visitors to respect boundaries, both literal and ethical. In the end, a father's decision to cut corners cost him his life, traumatized his family, and resulted in the unnecessary death of a captive tiger. No amount of cost saving was worth the price that was ultimately paid. The Ningbo Zoo incident continues to be cited in safety discussions, animal rights debates, and risk management courses, not just as a news story, but as a haunting case study of what can happen when caution is ignored and nature is underestimated. This next story is equal parts tragic, shocking, and if we're being honest, completely avoidable. Meet Prahlad Gujar, a 38-year-old maintenance worker from Rajasthan. A lovable guy with zero ambition and a whole lot of charm, Prahlad was the kind of dude who always chose parties over responsibilities. Everyone knew him as the fun guy, the life of every get-together, and that's exactly what led to the worst decision of his life. In February 2024, Prahlad was supposed to attend his niece's wedding down south. Instead, he lied to his family, claiming he couldn't get the time off work. The truth? He did get the week off. He just didn't feel like dealing with a week of awkward family small talk and ceremonies. So he spent that time partying non-stop with his buddies. For 5 straight days, they drank, wandered around local hangouts, crashed wherever they could, and basically relived their college years. But by Saturday morning, Prahlad was the last man standing. His friends had all tapped out, hungover, or passed out. Not ready to stop the party, he went bar-hopping solo, building a solid buzz before lunch. At some point, he made his way to the Sri Venetasara Zoological Park, a family-friendly zoo known for keeping intoxicated visitors out. Somehow, the ticket booth worker didn't clock his drunken state, and Prahlad slipped through the gates without issue. At first, he wandered the usual paths, unimpressed by the monkeys and deer. Then he moved on to the predators. Still bored, he decided to snap a few selfies in front of the lion enclosure, and that's when security noticed something was off. A guard named Sanji, who'd dealt with his fair share of unruly visitors, knew trouble when he saw it. He warned Prahlad to back off from the fence, clearly marked with signs telling guests to stay at least 8 feet away. But Prahlad wasn't done. Just behind the main lion exhibit was a quieter off-limits area meant for new arrivals or sick animals, a place clearly marked as restricted. Prahlad waited for the guard to get distracted, then darted down the path. He climbed a water tank overlooking the holding area, and below him, a massive male lion and 2 lionesses. With a drunken laugh and his phone raised high, Prahlad jumped. Yes, jumped 12 feet straight into the enclosure. The lions were startled at first, especially the male who snapped instinctively at Prahlad's shoulder. It wasn't a full bite, but it was enough to make Prahlad panic. Screaming in pain, he tried to run, even making it to a nearby tree, but he didn't get far. The lion caught him by the ankle and dragged him back like a rag doll. Prahlad didn't stand a chance. The lion pounced again, this time biting down on his neck. The break was instant. Death came before suffocation or blood loss. What's even more unsettling, the lions didn't eat him. They just played with him. For 2 hours, zookeepers watched in horror as the lions pawed at his body like it was a toy, scattering his remains across the enclosure. When staff finally lured the lions away with food, the damage was brutal. The coroner had to collect fragments of Prahlad's body from an 8-foot radius. The zoo later confirmed that the lion wasn't unusually aggressive, just doing what a predator does when something falls into its territory. The lion wasn't punished, just relocated for observation. In fact, zoo officials say he'll soon be returned to his main enclosure. Prahlad's death wasn't a tragedy of nature, it was a tragedy of human stupidity. And hopefully, no one else will be foolish enough to repeat his final, fatal mistake. It was meant to be the kind of afternoon you remember forever, the kind you tell stories about for years. A sun-soaked drive through South Africa's Lion Park, a car rolling slowly through the golden sprawl of Bushveld, windows down, cameras raised, hearts beating a little faster as lions roamed freely just meters away. For one 22-year-old American tourist and her male companion, it felt like stepping into a dream. The lions moved like shadows, silent, majestic, ancient. The thrill of being so close to something so powerful was intoxicating. 1 second, you're holding your breath to capture the perfect photo. The next, you're face to face with nature at its most unforgiving. She never saw it coming. The lioness appeared from the grass, golden coat glinting under the sun, her eyes locked on the vehicle. She didn't roar, she didn't growl, just approached, smooth, deliberate, calm. For a heartbeat, everything was still, and then it wasn't. In a blur of motion, the lioness lunged, claws scraped against metal. Massive jaws snapped through the open passenger window like a nightmare tearing through the veil of safety. There was no warning, no time to scream, no time to hit the button to roll the glass back up. In an instant, the young woman was gone. From the seat beside her companion to the crushing grip of the wild, dragged half from the vehicle, her body twisted violently by the raw power of the predator. Her companion shouted, grabbed, fought, helpless against muscle and instinct honed by millennia. Park staff raced toward the scene, but seconds matter in the wild, and by the time help arrived, the damage had been done. Blood soaked the car seat. The cameras were forgotten. The silence that followed was the kind that only comes after something irreversible. She died before paramedics could even try to save her. The man survived, wounded, shaken, still alive. But how do you process something like that? One moment, they were side by side, wrapped in the thrill of adventure. The next, she was gone forever, taken by the very wildness they'd come to witness. Authorities opened an investigation, as they always do when humans are reminded that they're not in control out here. A police spokesman called it an unnatural death, as though anything about being dragged from your car by a lion could ever feel natural. But this wasn't the first time. Lion Park was famous for letting guests get close. Too close. Just months before, an Australian tourist had been bitten in the leg for lowering his window. A 13-year-old boy had been attacked by a cheetah after slipping through a fence. Every incident carried the same warnings, repeated like a chant. Keep your windows up. Stay inside the vehicle. Don't forget where you are. But warnings blur when the line between thrill and danger feels so thin, when lions seem calm, when everything feels under control, until it isn't. The fate of the lioness remained unknown. Would she be relocated, killed, kept behind barriers? No one said for sure. After all, she hadn't broken any rules. She was the rule. She followed the only law the wild has ever known. Survival, instinct, dominance. There was no villain here, just a moment. A choice, a rule ignored, and a life ended. That's the danger of the wild. It doesn't ask for your trust. It doesn't offer second chances. And when it reaches back, it does so without mercy. In the summer of 2002, Prague Zoo became the site of a grim and cautionary tale when 35-year-old Joseph Dominik made a decision that would cost him his life. Late one night, after the zoo had closed its gates to the public and the animals had settled into their nighttime routines, Dominik managed to breach the secure perimeter of the tiger enclosure. According to reports at the time, he had been drinking, and though the exact motivation remains unknown, he allegedly wanted to pet the tigers, a baffling and fatal miscalculation. Climbing over the safety barriers and fences that clearly marked the restricted area, he entered a space occupied by one of nature's most powerful predators. Tigers are not just big striped cats, they are apex hunters, territorial by nature and not remotely domesticated. When Dominik stepped into their enclosure, the animals reacted as any wild tiger might. They saw an intruder, not a visitor. What followed was as tragic as it was preventable. His body was discovered the next morning, mauled and lifeless, the scene confirming what everyone feared. It was not a zoo error, not a security flaw, and certainly not a random accident. This was a direct consequence of ignoring clearly posted warnings and common sense. The zoo, understandably, was shaken. Not only did the incident spark public alarm, but it also raised the dreaded question of whether the tiger or tigers should be euthanized. Thankfully, authorities and zoo officials agreed that the animals had done nothing wrong. They were simply reacting on instinct, protecting their territory from what they perceived as a threat. No disciplinary action was taken against the animals. The enclosure had been secure, the signage was in place, and the zoo had followed every safety regulation required. The truth was hard to escape. This was not a case of animal aggression, but human recklessness. The tragedy served as a painful reminder that wild animals, no matter how long they've lived in captivity, are still wild. They are not pets, not playthings, and certainly not creatures to be approached in their own space for thrill or curiosity. In the days that followed, the story made headlines across Europe. Some mourned the loss, others debated how such an incident could even happen in a modern zoo. And while public opinion was split, some blaming the zoo, others blaming the man, it was clear to most observers that this was a sobering example of what happens when boundaries between humans and wild animals are ignored. Josef Dominik's death wasn't just a tragic event, it became a stark warning etched into the history of the Prague Zoo. And while it would be easy to paint this as a bizarre or even foolish decision made under the influence, the more important takeaway lies in respecting nature's boundaries. Zoos are places of education and conservation, but they are not playgrounds. The animals inside are not characters from cartoon or selfie props. They're living beings with instincts that don't switch off because a human walks in with good intentions. Ultimately, the Josef Dominik case reminds us of the fragile line between fascination and danger. It's one thing to admire tigers from a safe distance, to marvel at their beauty and strength. It's another thing entirely to step into their domain uninvited. And unfortunately for Joseph, that distinction was learned too late.